all this building going on in Old Town Scottsdale everywhere. I mean, I went to college here 20 years ago, and these lots were vacant then. Now it's all happening at once. I mean, who's to say that, like this first set of buildings right here in Old Town Scottsdale, the commercial buildings that are getting torn down in a couple of weeks, I mean, is there any stopping it?
The stopping it is really through the citizens standing up and recognizing their community character. And now it's very important because the Garden District is immediately being ringed by larger buildings, larger apartments. We're going to 3- and 4-story and more contemporary character. They're there because of the value inherent in the Garden District. That's where people want to be. So suddenly the developers are flocking to the area very immediately to put some protection over the Garden District. The Garden District is going to be lost through encroachment. Right now, fortunately, the encroachment is occurring on the perimeter, and it's feeding off of the value of the Garden District. But if we do lose something, or we see something built in the middle and the Garden District gets cut in half, we lose context, we lose integrity. So we want to take steps to put the historic designation in place so we have a way to safeguard that heritage.
Sure. Everybody, this is Carol. She's actually a resident over at Park Scottsdale. Owner at Park Scottsdale, and lives at 10...
At Main Street Plaza, right there in Goldwater.
Right.
Behind the Museum of the West.
Yeah. So these are a couple of our commissioners here. This is Peter, Regina.
Hi. I had to drink water because it was so hot. Look at
my daughter.
There you go.
Diana.
Hi, Diana. How are you doing? I'm Ben. Did you come to paint?
No.
I did. She does paint at Stars. She does
she?
To Stars, the day program there.
That's nice.
And she does painting.
Thirsty. Well, we're just sitting here having a conversation about historic preservation. Would you want to jump in and ask any questions? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. How about your mama, Carol?
So, yeah, I really hope that the city will support, because, we need to preserve our mid-century modern architecture. And when I tell people, about the area, I always mention the Valley Ho, because everybody knows the Valley Ho,
right,
but they don't necessarily know the names of a lot of the apartment complexes around there. I lived in Scottsdale in the early 60s. Moved to Arizona in 1948. So, Scottsdale is nothing then.
Right.
I'm very happy to be back. I love Scottsdale. Let you go on with.
Thanks for jumping in there. We really appreciate it. Yeah, good. Well, thanks for coming over. Nice to meet you, Diane.
That was hot.
Huh?
I had to drink water.
Yeah.
There's truly a economic rationale for some of this to happen too, because the property values appreciate the fact that the property owners appreciate the fact that the property values are going up,
Right.
and will go up as a side effect of the historic preservation activities.
That's a huge point.
Yeah.
Is people do need to understand that their property values are going to do nothing but improve as a result. And I think when you speak to someone's assets and equity, it speaks a lot louder than anything else, unfortunately. I mean, we all have the artistic, the need to preserve or the want to preserve, but when you speak directly to the fact that it's going to enhance value in the home, that's an important factor.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a nice little bonus. But, I always, since I've lived in Scottsdale since 1958, I've always felt like the uniqueness is what appealed to me. It was unique on its own. You can build
Right.
any community in LA or Las Vegas or New Mexico, but why not let it be unique and don't let the generic architecture define it. Let it have its own character. You can have places for new development, but you have to preserve the important structures within the history of Scottsdale.
Roger, you've told me some really wild stories about your early days in your career. Do you want to just kind of tell us a couple of the things that have changed the most?
I moved to Phoenix in 1982, and there were essentially none of the historic districts had been established in Phoenix, and I don't think there was any program going in Scottsdale yet. And so in my career, I've actually seen the historic preservation movement emerge and flourish. And when you see what's happened over 30 years in the central Phoenix neighborhoods, it's amazing the transformation and the quest for authenticity. And when I worked for either the city or the state, the question was not, oh my God, you're going to tell me what color you're going to paint your house. The question was, what color was my house and how can you help me paint it back? So there's much more interest in moving towards restoration than not. And look how far flung the neighborhoods have gone in Phoenix, and that now we have historic neighborhoods and historic districts in Scottsdale, Mesa, Tempe, Chandler, Glendale, all over the valley. There are recognizable neighborhoods and districts that are established that are reaping the benefits, and it's become a part and parcel of the valley that we have these neighborhoods, which is sort of a surprising thing to say when you think about Phoenix generically. Oh my God, Phoenix, there's nothing there. It's just this massive suburbia, but it's not. That is out there on the fringe, but the core of the communities have a real identity that's been appreciated.
Gotcha. Back to a couple more of the questions here. So this one is coming up a lot, I think everywhere. Why should I maintain the historic features of my property? Why would we do that? The features of a property.
I'm going to let the architect
Yeah,
answer.
sure. Peter, that'd be great.
Well, I think it stands the test of time, and it tells you what it took to build those things. Today, the bracketry that we put on apartment buildings, the stucco buildings, is foam. It's artificial versus the cast iron work, the sculpted woodwork, and so forth. That is extremely unique and impossible to duplicate without a tremendous cost.
Perfect. So when we're talking about the historic features of a property, Regina, you probably see this every day, being that you're kind of living in one of the first multi-HOA districts to work towards the historic preservation. What would an example be at Villa Monterey of a historic feature that could be removed?
Okay, a perfect example is windows.
Yeah.
That's and roof lines is another example, and
Trim work.
doors,
Yeah.
door heights. We had a recent case come before the commission about door heights, and one of the, we did not have certain types of windows in that community. So one of the characteristics that we try to preserve is that type of window that was original to the community. Now, of course, the materials that are being used today are going to be different and more sustainable, more economic in terms of energy efficient and so forth. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. But the look and feel and profile of the windows is going to be similar to how they were built.
Gotcha.
Well, that's part and parcel of trying to retain integrity.
Right.
And yes, windows get replaced over time, but hopefully the replacement windows are of the same form and design as the originals, so we don't lose that integrity over the conflicting, sometimes seemingly conflicting issues of energy and design. That there are ways to mimic the original and replicate the original appearance so you don't lose the overall character of the neighborhood.
One thing that I think is important in all the preservation talk is the sense of scale. And I think the scale of Scottsdale back in the 60s when they did all the garden apartments, the scale of that was one that you didn't have to drive far. You had amenities around you. You were easily able to walk and communicate with your neighbors. It was a scalable city. And if we aren't careful, we won't develop the scale. We won't be able to keep that level of scale as we go higher and more dense. There are ways to do that, but it just like Soho, it takes 30, 40, 50 years to get it to that point in time.
Interesting. Great. Guys, what would you say the biggest issue facing us right now is here in Scottsdale? Would it be development, encroachment, these types of things, or is it just people not caring enough to?
One of my concerns is lack of infrastructure, and I think one of you addressed that earlier. The height and density has increased, in my opinion, tremendously just over the last 10 years, but the infrastructure hasn't kept up. So
That's an excellent point, because when you get congestion to the point where you're forced to move a certain way through the city or look for the amenities that you're looking for, if it's cumbersome, you'll say it's not worth it anymore.
Right. Interesting.
I would want to say my concern as a neighbor is encroachment, because we don't want things to encroach to the point where we lose the character that we aspire to retain. That's true in the Garden District. It's true in some of the neighborhoods. If you go into Arcadia, there's all kinds of things going on, which is just to the east. But if you go into Town and Country, which is another mid-century modern neighborhood designed by architect Ralph Haver, encroachment and change would have a real dramatic impact on that neighborhood. And adjacent to that, Village Groves, lots of very modest neighborhoods from the mid-50s. If you have a sea of one-story houses and somebody builds a two-story, well, I hope it's in scale. Scale is more important to me than a lot of other things in terms of infill.
Right.
But all of the neighborhoods, because of the increasing values, because people want to be in those neighborhoods that have character, the development community wants to be there too. And they can have a huge impact to the negative if they don't sort of understand why they want to be there is because of the character. And the need to designate so we have some kind of control is critical before we have encroachment and before we have a change in scale.
And one thing we can do to help enhance that is adaptive reuse. If we convince developers that one of the best ways to make a unique destination for whatever their product is adaptive reuse, because you can't build those kind of interesting characters with a high ceiling, the exposed structure, the interesting facades. One of the things that I think was part of the draw to Scottsdale 50, 60 years ago was the view of the mountains, the amount of natural vegetation, the cactus, and also the orange orchards. And I would hate to see that we're going to lose the views of Camelback, Papago, McDowell's, and all the other surrounding mountains like White Banks and South Mountain.
That would be unfortunate, wouldn't it? We're already kind of preparing for that over where I'm at. Just right across the street from this district is the proposed Museum Square. So that's right as you kind of like. Where are we?
Yep, I know exactly where you're
you know where that is, right there.
Yep.
Now, I mean, it's amazing to me that it's taken this long for that to be developed. Because it's been
Loma
empty
School
for
will stand
decades.
out.
Where's Loma? The school is.
Second Street.
It's gone though, right?
No, there's a
it's
portion
there.
of it left.
It's the artist community now.
Oh, that's where we went to school.
There's a
crazy.
neighborhood school that has survived in the middle of this major change of the character in that part of Scottsdale as being commercial. But the Loma School has survived. Architecture will survive. If we designate those individual properties that are critically important, hopefully they will survive and not be torn down. If we'd lost Loma, that's a very important traditional piece between what we now call Old Town and what we're soon going to be called the Garden District.
Right.
The Loma School is kind of a stepping stone
Right.
that links those two together. And the importance of that individual piece of architecture is huge to the character of South Scottsdale.
And I think you mentioned Old Town as you did. That is so critical in the description of Scottsdale and the draw to downtown. And when you lose that to where it's newer or older, it no longer has that draw.